So this reflection is based on Mark 13 verses 1 to 8. Now last week we saw how Jesus had been in the temple and how he had been absolutely denouncing the teachers of the law for their hypocrisy. He said they loved the status, they loved to be acknowledged by everybody, but their lifestyle was one of greed and exploitation. He contrasted this with a humble widow. She was nothing, she had nothing, she was a nothing in that society, and yet she put her whole trust in God. And so this scene is where Jesus is leaving the temple, and as they do with his disciples, one of the disciples says, look at this amazing building. Look at the size of these stones. It's just awesome. The temple was actually a magnificent building. It was built in a very high point so it could be seen all over Jerusalem and the surrounding countryside. It was built of a white marble and it had gold leaf decorations, and apparently in the sun that would just glisten and could be seen for kilometres around. The temple was very important to the Jewish people. This was the presence of God amongst them. And they were able any time to be able to look up and see, yes, there's the temple, God is with us. And so it was very important to them as God's people. The disciple who pointed out the magnificent building seemed to have missed the lesson that went on previously. Yes, the building was amazing, but what was going on inside it was corrupt and hollow. So Jesus said, look, there's a time coming when this magnificent building is going to be destroyed. Now, to the Jewish person, that would be absolutely unthinkable. We know from history that 40 or so years later it was. In 70 AD, there was a Jewish rebellion, and the Romans got thoroughly sick of this little nation, and so they just came in full force. They besieged Jerusalem, they burnt the temple, and they really sort of took the whole nation, or what was left of the nation, into captivity. So people either starved to death during their besiege, or they were killed fighting, or they were taken as slaves. So it was a pretty horrible time that was coming. On hearing that the temple would be destroyed, the disciples are saying, well, when's this going to be? You know, what signs can we look out for? And Jesus didn't answer that, but he said two things. He said, firstly, do not be deceived, and secondly, do not be alarmed. Now, he described a time there would be wars, there would be earthquakes, there would be famine. He'd tell them they would suffer persecution. So why then would he say, do not be deceived? He said there would be people come and claim to be the one to save the world. But he said, be careful. Can't compete with that. When things are going wrong all around us, it's very tempting to just grab at the first thing that we think might be the salvation for our problem, the way out. But Jesus is saying, don't do that. Don't be deceived. Okay, I'll illustrate it with a joke. This is the Prime Minister and the Treasurer, it doesn't matter who they are, were returning to Canberra on the private jet. And they met up with a young backpacker who was absolutely distraught because he'd missed his flight to Canberra and he really needed to get there. And so the Prime Minister thought, well, he'll show compassion and kindness, and said, look, you can come with us, there's plenty of seats on the plane. And so they did. They got a little way up in the air and the pilot radioed through and he said, I'm sorry, gentlemen, but we have a problem. This plane is in trouble. You're going to have to parachute out. Now, there are 2 parachutes and they're under your seats. Well, the Prime Minister said, well, I'm the brains of the country. I'll have to take one of them. So he did, and he jumped. And then the Treasurer looked at the young man and he said, this is awful. He said, I've got this really important job in the whole country, but you're a young man with your whole life ahead of you. What are we going to do? And the backpacker said, don't worry, the brains of the country just jumped with my backpack. We don't just grab the nearest thing when things are difficult. We need to be careful and not be deceived. Our world's in trouble. It's a mess. There are wars, there's famine, there's political turmoil, there's sex trafficking, there's exploitation of workers, and so on and so on. It's so easy to look for someone to rise up and answer all our problems. Jesus said, the time will come when people will come and they will claim to have the solution to all the world's problems. but don't be deceived. The second thing that Jesus said was this: do not be alarmed. Right, easier said than done when there's shells blowing up the place and bombs falling and you haven't got enough money to put food on the table. But Jesus said we're called to have hope. Now, what we hope in matters, because if our hope is maintaining the lifestyle, the nice comfortable lifestyle that I have, or if our hope is getting the right political party in power, or if our hope is winning Tats Lotto, or maybe it's the hope of being able to rebel against an unjust regime, these hopes cannot be sustained. The only hope is Jesus. He'll never let us down. When times are tough, he's there with us and he'll help us through. Even if we have to face death, then we know that if our hope is in Jesus, then there is a much better place waiting for us. It's the only hope that can sustain us through hard times. Now, although Jesus predicted hard times, he said these hard times are the birth pangs of something new. Now, I gather labour is very painful, but at the end of it, there's a new life. While the Jewish people would have been devastated seeing their temple destroyed, it was opening up a new era, an era when the presence of God no longer depended on a building, but would be in the hearts and lives of people who invited Jesus into it. Our challenge is to see if there are things in our life that we need to tear down. Even things that might look quite spectacular, but underneath they're harbouring things like greed or selfishness or dishonesty or whatever. We don't need to take a good hard look at our life. But Jesus says, do not be alarmed. Trust in him.